we go. So so in a second, in terms of how we're going to set out the presentation this evening, it's going to last sort of 45 minutes or an hour or so, depending how many questions we've got at the end. But I'll go through the introduction to the project team in a minute to see who is here. We'll go through the aims of the event itself, and then Alan will do a bit of a recap on the strategy area, what the aims of the strategy are, the risks that are being dealt with, and the approach. And then we've got Ben Taylor here. He's going to go through the sort of proposed draft options that we've got at the moment and how those options have come about. And at the end, we'll talk about the engagement that we've done so far this round, and how you can help. So I think next slide. So I've already said my name is Matt Smith. I'm the engagement officer for the project. I work for Dorset Coast Forum, and we've also got Sarah Parker doing all the tech wizardry in the background as well. And she's from Dorset Coast Forum as well. Alan and Ben, do you want to come in and sort of introduce yourselves as well?
Yeah, I'll go first. Yeah, so I'm Alan Frampton. I'm the client project manager. I work at Southwest Flood and Coastal, which is hosted by BCP Council, but I'm asked to lead this project for Dorset Council and the Environment Agency.
And I'm Ben Taylor. I'm the project manager from ACOM. We're technical consultants helping with the development of the project. I'm in the coastal management and coastal engineering team at ACOM.
Brilliant, thank you. So before I hand over to Alan, just the aims of this evening is to provide an update on the work that's being done to develop the Portland to Wyke Regis flood and coastal risk management strategy. And if you haven't heard about the strategy at all, obviously obviously setting out what the strategy is doing. And then we want to sort of seek feedback and input from stakeholders, residents, and the community on the options appraisal so far that are going to inform the strategy. So without further ado, I will hand over to Alan next. Oh no, we've got a poll first. Sorry, we've got a poll. So I think hopefully in a second, a poll should pop up on the screen, and it's just to help us really know where people have heard about the event. So if you could just pop in whichever is most relevant or whichever ones are most relevant for you, it helps us in the future sort of with where we should be sending out communications and awareness. I'll just give you a few seconds or so to do that. Okay, I think we've got most people in there. Thanks for doing that. So I think Alan, we're over to you now then.
So, but some of you may have heard some of this before, but if you have, it'll be a bit familiar. If you haven't, it's just an introduction to what the strategy area is and what we're doing. So our strategy area goes from the lower part of Portland, Underhill, starting at Chesil Cove in the Lyme Bay side in the southeast, running up Chesil Beach to pretty much opposite the Chesil Beach Holiday Park, and then coming across the Fleet at the northern end of the holiday park and along the harbour frontage to the boundary of Portland Port in Castletown. Go to the next slide, please, Ben. So the strategy aims to set out a long-term, and by long-term we mean around 100 years, sustainable integrated approach to how we manage coastal flooding and erosion risks in that area. Its starting point is the shoreline management plan policies that were adopted in 2011, but taking into account the fact that we've now got more data and evidence since those policies were defined, including updated climate change guidance that we have to follow and account for. And our aim in setting out the strategy is to have a coordinated series of studies and schemes over the coming years that will all align to delivering coastal resilience to the area. Next slide, please, Ben. So the strategy itself will not guarantee the funding for future schemes. There are further steps to go through, but it'll all be guided by this strategy. We won't be defining local plan policies, but the Dorset local plan is obviously in development at the moment, and we are sharing our information with the planning team at Dorset so they can consider it as that work progresses. It won't be directly addressing coastal access concerns or changing environmental designations, both coastal access and the existing environmental designations, however, will be factors we consider when appraising the different options and assessing the potential positive or negative impacts on those features and others in the area. Go to the next slide, please, Ben. And I'll hand over to Ben at this point.
Okay, thanks, Alan. So before I go over the work that we've been doing recently on the options, we thought it'd be quite useful just to give a very quick recap of the risks facing the frontage that we're trying to deal with over the next 100 years. And the arrows on the map just give an indication of what the key risks are and how they change along the frontage. So if we start down at the southern corner at Chisel, the two main risks are flood risk from wave overtopping and then beach drawdown during storms that can lead to damage to the defences. And then moving northwest along Chesil Beach, the main seawall and the gabion defences come to an end, and then we transition into a natural beach. And here we have flood risk from wave overtopping and also percolation through the beach. But a really significant risk is actually beach rollback, and this is the process by which the beach moves inland over time in response to storm events. And the main worry with this process is that it's particularly difficult to manage or to stop. And in the long term, the beach could move back onto the main road along the causeway. And that would obviously have quite big impacts on transport on and off Portland. So moving around the rest of the frontage, so on the Portland Harbour side, most of this area is quite low lying. With sea level rise projected in the future, we do expect the flood risk to get much worse. It's quite localized and low at the moment, but we do expect that to get much, much worse and deeper over time. Okay, it's just another poll, I think, from Sarah. Really just asking which area of the frontage are you most interested in? So that should pop up shortly.
Oh, I think that's most people. Hello, I can see you can't seem to see any of the slides being shown. Has anyone else got that problem at all? Yeah. Perhaps try rejoining Hannah, see if that makes any difference. I think we can probably close the poll now, Sarah. Thank you. Cool. Back to you, Ben.
Okay, so this slide just gives a very quick overview of where we currently are with the project. So over the past several months, we've been working on developing and appraising the options for managing the coastal risks. And we started this process off by developing a long list of options, and we've since narrowed that down to a draft shortlist. And during this round of engagement, we're seeking feedback on that draft shortlist. We're trying to understand whether you agree with the list, think that there's anything missing that we should be including on the shortlist, and just trying to gauge which of the shortlist options that we are presenting that you feel are most favourable. And with the feedback that we receive, we'll obviously be taking that on board, and then we'll go away, we'll update and finalise the shortlist of options in the new year. Okay, so for the option development and appraisal, there are various steps to this process that we've followed and that are covered in the next few slides. And the first thing for us to do is to set out the spatial framework for the appraisal. And we've done this by dividing the frontage into 11 different areas, which we've called option development units. And each unit has similar characteristics and features. For example, it may have the same coastal defence asset, or it may have a very similar land use. And within each of these areas, we've developed different options for managing the particular risks facing that area. But whilst we're looking at options in each unit separately, we'll also need to consider how the options across the units all link up and combine. So for example, in many units, the flood cells merge during larger flood events. So in order for us to manage this risk more broadly and cohesively, we need to ensure that the leading options across the units all align, and there isn't a gap in the approach anywhere that could kind of hinder adjacent units. And it's also worth remembering as well, before we get into the detail, that there is a lot of uncertainty about future conditions, like the rates of sea level rise, the movement of Chesil Beach, and also how much funding may be available for coastal defence works in the future. So with the strategy, it's not our goal to create a plan that is set in stone for the next 100 years. Instead, what we'll be doing is assessing and developing options based on more of an adaptive approach. And that would essentially involve identifying different pathways with kind of pre-planned switching points in the future. So, for example, if sea levels rise as we anticipate, then we will deliver plan A. But if sea levels rise faster or slower than expected, we could switch to plan B or C. And this approach is useful because it will really provide us with a lot of flexibility in the future, and it will enable a plan to evolve over time, depending on how some of those uncertainties evolve and develop. So once we'd established the spatial framework, our next step was to develop the long list of options. And goal of this process was really to cast the net as wide as possible at that early stage. And each of our long list of options was comprised of two different elements. So firstly, we have the strategic option intent, which essentially outlines what the overall aim of the option is. And these range from do nothing, which is essentially the least amount of intervention and lowest cost, all the way up to improving existing defences or constructing new defences, which would be the highest cost. And then there are various options in between those two options. So we have do minimum, we have sustain the existing defences, which is essentially maintaining what we currently have, or adapting land uses. The second element of the options is the local measures. You can see these on the right-hand side of the table, and these are essentially the on-the-ground interventions that would actually be used to go about delivering the strategic options, whether that be constructing a new sea wall, undertaking beach management, or improving drainage, for example. Our next step was to begin appraising some of the local measures that we had identified at that early stage. And the aim here was to try to identify which of the local measures would be appropriate for each of the different units around the frontage. And we did this by using a multi-criteria appraisal for each option development unit, where we scored each of the measures against 10 different categories. And then based on this scoring, the measures with the lowest scores were screened out from further appraisal, and the remaining measures were screened in and taken forward. And to help inform this multi-criteria appraisal approach, we had two key stakeholder workshops over the summer. One covered the options for each area, each unit along the strategy frontage, and another was more broadly focused on how we can manage the risk to the main road in the future. With the measures that we'd screened in, we then started to flesh out the options in a bit more detail. And for each strategic option, this involved identifying what we call a package of measures. And this is essentially the different combinations of measures that could be used together to deliver the options. So, for example, to improve the defences in a given location, it could potentially need a combination of improved tow protection, beach management, and then potentially raising crest levels, for example. We also looked at the potential alignment for the defences, which in turn helped us to make a kind of a ballpark top-down estimate of potential costs and affordability. We also looked at when the measures may actually be needed. So not everything's going to be needed immediately, straight away. A lot of the risks aren't expected to occur into the future, so we considered that onset of risk and the residual life of things like the existing defences to help improve or to inform the timings of when things are going to be needed. And then finally, we also looked at the different technical challenges that each package of measures may have, the environmental pros and cons, and we also did a very initial assessment of potential social impacts on the local community, which will go away and update following the feedback we receive during this round of engagement. And with the long list options developed in a bit more detail, what we then did was narrow this long list down to a short list. And we did this by considering whether each of the options would achieve various critical success factors, which are outlined in the top left of the slide. So these include the strategic fit. So does it align with Dorset Council and the Environment Agency's strategic goals and aspirations? Does the option provide value for money? Does the supplier have capability and capacity to actually deliver the options? Are they likely to be affordable, and are they likely to be achievable? And for some of the options, there was some uncertainty around whether they would meet all of these critical success factors or not. But for the time being, where there is uncertainty, we have given these options the benefit of the doubt. We've taken them through to the shortlist and included them. And then when we get to the next stage of the appraisal, we'll be able to make a more informed judgment whether we need to take these through as a leading option or to rule them out. Where it's clear that the options do not meet all of those critical success factors, we don't have uncertainty, then we've used this as a basis to rule them out at the shortlist stage. Okay, so over the next few slides, I'll just provide a bit more detail of the draft shortlist in each of the different option development units. Just something to bear in mind when going through these slides is that many of the options that we're talking about, they won't be needed imminently. Most are options that will be needed many years or potentially even decades into the future. And as part of the job, during the next round of the appraisal, we'll be looking to establish what exactly the priorities are in terms of scheme delivery and potential timings of some of these schemes in the future. And you'll notice that we're starting on ODU 2, so Option Development Unit 2. That's because ODU 1 covers the Chesil Cove area, and there's a separate project currently underway here that's appraising options for that particular location and developing designs. And for the strategy, we will simply be incorporating the recommendations of the other project into the strategy. We won't be reappraising options here. That's being done separately by the different project. So starting with ODU 2, the two main risks facing this area are wave overtopping, which can lead to flood risk, and also the beach being drawn down during storm events. So the beach being eroded, which can lead to undermining of existing defences. And you can see the present day flood risk is shown on the figure on the right-hand side. This is a flood map showing the extent and depth of a 1 in 200 year event, which is a particularly rare and extreme event, but does give an indication of the amount of flooding that could occur with that scale of event. We've got 5 main strategic options in this unit. So as our baseline, we have the do nothing, which is essentially our kind of hypothetical walk away scenario. And we use this as our baseline to compare the other options against and to assess their benefits. We've also got a do minimum option. This is essentially a continuation of the status quo. It would involve small scale maintenance to defences when they're damaged. But over the long term, it may result in defences eventually failing as they continue to age and get older. And the flood risk would also continue to get worse because over time, because we wouldn't be changing the crest level of the defences, that would remain unchanged. And with the risk of flooding and sea level rise, that would expect it to get worse over time. We then have a sustain option. This option would follow a more proactive maintenance approach, a more costly, a more investment into the defences to ensure that they can last for the next 100 years. It may involve providing some additional tow protection to the defences and also refurbishing the defences in the future. However, similar to the do minimum option, the crest level of the defences wouldn't be changed over time. And therefore, with sea level rise, the flood risk would be expected to get worse. The improve option, this goes a step further. It actually looks to raise or modify the defences so that they can provide a higher standard of protection against flooding in the future, and also to help accommodate sea level rise. And then finally, we've got the adapt option, and this would consider relocation of infrastructure and potentially property as well in the future if the risk of flooding or erosion gets so severe due to climate change and none of the other options are affordable. It's unlikely that this is going to be the preference or a leading option, but it could be a pathway that could be delivered if options like sustain or improve can't be funded or can't get approval due to other reasons like environmental designations. And you'll also notice that a couple of the options as well, in their descriptions, they include a reference to resilience. And this is essentially small-scale property level measures that could be installed alongside the options to help reduce the risk of flooding or improving the resilience against flooding on a property-by-property basis. And this image here just shows an illustration of the existing defences in this unit. We've marked on here with the orange and green arrows where some of the measures for the sustain and improve options could be implemented. You can see where we refer to tow protection with the orange arrow. And then the green arrows indicate the different possibilities for improving the standard of protection against flood risk. You could either raise or modify the front edge of the defences, or alternatively raise the existing setback wall along the back of the promenade. Okay, so moving on to ODU 3. So here the beach, it does look undefended currently, but there is actually a defence system buried beneath the beach along this unit. This is comprised of the interceptor culvert that's buried along the back of the beach, and this works by diverting water that percolates through the beach and it diverts it away from Chisel. There's also a row of gabion mattresses along the beach crest that help to reduce the risk of the beach breaching during storms. And you may notice some of those gabion mattresses are actually exposed at the southern end along the crest of the beach. We've also got a similar list of strategic options here to ODU2. So do nothing, do minimum, sustain the existing defences, improve the existing defences, and then adapt. And with the do minimum and sustain options, these would primarily be focused on maintaining the existing defences to varying extents and also undertaking beach management. But even with these options, in the future, there would be an increased risk of flooding due to sea level rise. There'd also be a risk of the beach rolling back during storms because beach material would continue to be moved up and over the gabion mattresses during those storm events. The improve option aims to reduce the risk of flooding and beach rollback by making modifications to the gabion mattresses. For example, by raising that crust level of the mattresses along the crest, or alternatively by constructing a setback wall landward of the beach. And again, this illustration just shows the existing interceptor culvert and the gabion mattress system. And as you can see here, we've marked on where it may be viable to alter the defences to improve them. So either raising the gabions or constructing a wall above the interceptor culvert. But one of the major considerations along this frontage is the environmental designations that we have, including the World Heritage Site. So these designations are an important factor for the area, and they may just potentially restrict what could realistically be achieved in this location in terms of building new defences or modifying the existing. So ODU4, this includes the monsoon drain, which is where water from the interceptor culvert flows into, and then it flows along the monsoon drain towards the northwest before it reaches Portland Harbour. We've got Chesil Beach, which is next to the monsoon drain, and the beach is undefended along this frontage. With the do nothing and do minimum options, over the long term, the most significant risk would actually be the rollback of the beach during storms. And that beach would roll back into the monsoon drain, which would essentially block the channel and result in greater flood risk. So we've got a photograph of the monsoon drain shown here. The sustain option is mainly focused on managing that beach rollback risk. So we've identified two different approaches for doing this. One is focused on proactive beach management that would try to kind of keep the beach in position over time. And then a second approach that would involve extending the gabion mattresses that we have in ODU2 and extending them along the length of ODU3. It is important to remember with both of those options, though, that we are working with the dynamic and beach system here. So there would remain some residual risk that the beach could still move. That risk will probably be a bit less with the gabion mattress approach because you are introducing that hard defense to the crest of the beach, which would provide a bit more stability. The improve options here, these aim to manage the flooding risk to the main road. There's various approaches for this, such as raising the road level or building a setback structure between the monsoon drain and the road. And another alternative that would perhaps provide the most robust solution would actually be extending the interceptor culvert along the length of this unit. And my understanding is that was actually the original design for the interceptor culvert when it was constructed back in the 80s. But my understanding is that didn't actually move forward at the time, primarily due to it being too high a cost. And just as a final point in this unit, similar to elsewhere, there are a range of environmental designations along here, which will heavily influence which of these options are viable as a leading option. some of the options are likely to be very costly too. So, for example, extending the interceptor culvert, whilst it's on the shortlist, it is likely to be very high cost and also have large environmental impacts. So ODU5, so this is where the beach is closest to the main road, and therefore where the risk of rollback onto the road is at its greatest, particularly at the southeastern end of the unit, where there's the least amount of space between the beach and the road. There's also a significant risk of flooding to the road in this location too, and that's mainly from water percolating through the beach. And you can see that percolation in this photograph, which was taken last year. You can see the water building up on the left-hand side of the image as it's percolating through the beach, and then it flows out across the road from there. Now, in the short term, there may be some things that can be done to help reduce disruption to the road, and this is very much the focus of the sustain and improve options. This could be trying to stabilize the beach, which would be challenging, or constructing new defences or drainage between the beach and the road to help capture any beach material, and to divert away any water percolating through the beach. But just due to the really close proximity of the beach to the road, and as the beach continues to roll back over time, in the longer term, it may be unfeasible to completely prevent impacts on the road. And therefore, we have the adapt option in this unit, which focuses on making changes to the road position in the long term to move it away from the beach, and move it away from the flood risk. We've looked at various different options for doing this, and discussed ways forward with key stakeholders during the workshop we held in the summer. And the option that has made it through to the shortlist is actually setting the position of the road back into Portland Harbour in the future, either along a new causeway or potentially a bridge. Now, it's not going to be just the job of this strategy to figure out exactly what to do with the road in the long term. It's a much broader problem, that will need a lot of planning and a lot of lead-in time to deliver. But as part of the strategy, what we can do is continue to raise awareness, and suggest what we think may be an appropriate solution that other projects can then take forward, and develop the details for in the future. Okay, so ODU6, this is much more straightforward than the units that we've just been through. The main risk here is kind of trying to address the flood risk to the main road from the fleet. We've got a similar list of strategic options with the do minimum, sustain options focusing on maintaining the existing defences. And then in terms of the improve option, this would involve raising the defence level to reduce the flood risk to the road over time. So this can involve kind of raising the frontline defence or constructing a setback structure closer to the road, along the pavement. There may also be opportunities here to incorporate environmental enhancements, such as creating salt marsh habitat on the foreshore, and this would have the dual benefit of providing environmental benefits, but it would also help to attenuate waves and reduce wave overtopping risk as well. And then we've also got an adapt option, and this would involve making modifications to the road itself, such as raising the road level, or establishing potentially traffic management systems such as temporary traffic lights that could be used during periods of higher flood risk, just to try to improve the safety of road users along here. In ODU7, there's two main risks. So in the west part of the unit, there's a risk of coastal erosion to the cliffs beneath Chesil Beach Holiday Park. And then in the central and eastern part of the unit, there's a risk of flooding. But this risk of flooding is very low currently. It's only expected to increase in the future, with sea level rise. So the do minimum and sustain options would involve maintaining the existing armour revetment along the central and east parts of the unit. And then the improved defences option would involve raising the defence level in the future. This wouldn't be needed for some time, most likely from around 50 years from now. If there's not a strong economic case to improve the defences in the future, then the adapt option could be a possibility. This would involve maintaining the defences, but then potentially relocating some of the key infrastructure that may be at risk of flooding along the front line, such as the Wessex water pumping station that's located here. And there's no defences currently next to the cliffs in the west part of the unit, and this would remain the case with all of the shortlist options, as there's not really an economic or environmentally or an environmental case for building new defences along here. So ODU8, so this is on the opposite side of the main road. Again, it's got a very low flood risk initially, but that is expected to increase over time. And then if existing defences were to fail, if they weren't to be maintained, there'd also be some localised erosion risk in the future along the Rodwell Trail. We've got a similar approach here to the shortlist options as we've just been through in ODU7. So defence maintenance to varying extents for the do minimum and sustain options. Then in terms of the improve option, there are two areas where defences would need to be raised in the future. The first area is here, is shown here at Smallmouth Beach, and then the second area would be along the Rodwell Trail. Now that could either be along the front line, shown by the green arrow on the right-hand side, or potentially something a bit more set back, closer to the buildings on the left-hand side of the image. And then the adapt option here would really focus on what to do with the Rodwell Trail if there isn't an economic case or funding to maintain the existing defences. This could potentially involve relocating the footpath to a more landward position or an area of lower flood risk. ODU9, this covers the Ham Beach frontage, so the other side of the causeway to ODU5. So this includes the beach itself, includes the verge and the footpath next to the beach, and then also the main road. There's also a drainage channel between the main road and the footpath that we need to consider too. The main risks here are from flood risk to properties in the northern part of the unit, and then the rest of the unit is primarily flood risk to the main road in various locations. The improve options along here, they'd aim to utilise property level resilience measures to manage the flood risk to the small number of properties in the northern part of the unit. And then any new defences would be focused on managing the rest of the road from Portland Harbour. And there are different ways that this could be achieved, such as raising the verge level and the footpath level that it runs along, or by constructing a setback defence closer to the road alignment. ODU10, so this covers the Osprey Key area. This area is currently quite sheltered, and the initial flood risk is very low. However, with sea level rise, the risk of flooding is expected to increase significantly in the future, as a lot of the area is quite low-lying. There are extensive existing defences here currently, primarily privately owned. So the sustain options are very much focused on maintaining these defences. And then when the risk of flooding increases in the future, the improve option would aim to either raise the existing defences as shown here, or construct additional setback defences to manage the flood risk. And there's also opportunity as well to better utilise the airstrip area as a potential flood storage area for flooding coming from ODUs 2 to 4 around Chisel. So the options will also explore how this function of the airstrip could be improved. And this second photo just shows one of the existing setback defences, which could also be raised as part of any defence improvements. And you'll also notice as well that there's an adapt option in this unit. Now, depending on what's decided in ODU5 along the causeway for the position of the main road in the future, there may also need to be a potential to relocate the road as well on the mainland or on Portland through Osprey Key. And that could lead to quite significant changes to the road network. So this would obviously have impacts on the existing properties and businesses in the Osprey Key area. And therefore we've included the adapt option here to kind of cover any of those potential changes that may be required. And then finally, ODU 11, it's got a very similar risk to ODU 10 in that the initial flood risk is low, but it's expected to increase over time with sea level rise. In terms of the improve options, it's likely that the standard of protection could be improved mainly through setback defences in this unit. But there are many sensitive features like Portland Castle in this location. And the steer that we've had from Historic England so far on the project is that property level resilience measures to these assets would be preferable rather than large new hard defences either around or in the vicinity of these features. So we've tried to incorporate resilience measures into the options in this unit. Okay, that's it from me. Should I pass back to Alan?
I think it's me.
Is it Matt? Okay.
Yeah. Before we, I'm going to go run through the last couple of slides in terms of the engagement we've done for this round. But potentially, before I do that, is there any? We're going to have a Q&A sort of session at the end. But is there any burning questions at the moment while that information from Ben is still out there at the moment? Is there any questions at all? If not, we'll have a Q&A at the end if needed. Okay, so yeah, as the engagement, we were asking people how they can help inform the FCRM strategy. So this is our sort of third event we've done over the last couple of weeks. Is our online event. We've had a couple of face-to-face events in the week leading up to this. So we were at Portland Masonic Hall on the 1st of December. And we were there for the afternoon there. It was a really biblical day in terms of wind and rain coming. It was a good day to be talking about coastal flooding, to be honest. We had a small turnout there, unfortunately, due to the weather, potentially. We had a much more successful day last Thursday. So that was at the Beehive Cafe in Portland. We were there during their opening hours, and we had over 50 people come and chat to us and see the information that Ben has just shared with you. So, yeah, a much more positive sort of day. The weather was much better, so maybe we can blame that. And there was lots of nice cake and coffee as well at the same time. So this is our third and sort of final engagement event as part of this engagement round. But something that goes alongside this is that we've got a survey out, and this is to get people's feedback and comments on the shortlist of options that are being proposed. So this is either online, and you can access that on the webpage that Sarah has shared in the chat, or if you prefer to do a paper copy, and that presents the information in paper where you can take your time over doing it. The Beehive Cafe and the Wild Chesil Centre, the old Chesil Beach Visitor Centre, have agreed to have paper copies there. So you can go and collect those, fill them in there, or take them back home and bring them back again. And the survey's been open since the end of November, 21st of November, we've had it open, and we're going to keep it open till mid-January. So Sunday, the 18th of January. You've got plenty of time to fill in the survey should you want to, or you can fill it in while you're having your Christmas dinner, maybe. I don't know. So yeah, that's our engagement time. It is, if you're getting the paper copy of the survey or you're doing it online, it comes across as quite a large survey to start with, but that's obviously because we've got lots of information to share and lots of detail to share there. You don't have to fill in every single bit of it if you don't feel like you want to. If you're just interested in one of those sort of 11 units or locations that Ben's gone through, you can just select the ones that you are interested in. Obviously, if you've got the time and you want to fill in all of them, then feel free to do so as well. So if you're in Wyke Regis, it might be that you want to fill in the ODUs around that particular area. If you're in the Chisel sort of area, then you might want to fill in the locations there. There are also a couple of questions on the use of the main road as well, because that runs through all of the different locations or is vital to all the different locations. So there are a few questions to do with the main road and the options going forward with that as well. So I think we've got the next slide has just a couple of links for the webpage. So the webpage is there. As I said, we've already shared that in the link as well, but you can access some of the previous engagement round information. You can access some of the recordings that we've done previous, same as this presentation. And yeah, like I said, you can access the survey on there as well. So I think that brings us to our third and final poll of the evening. And this is essentially just for us really to have a chat about how you found today's event and the information presented. Was it too much, too technical, just about right, or not enough? That helps us going forward in terms of the information that we provide. So I'll just give you a few seconds or so to do that. Okay, I think that's everyone gone through there. Thank you. So that sort of brings us on to the end of the presentation now. So we've got plenty of time. If there's any burning questions or any queries at all, on the screen there, should you have any further comments or questions, my email address is on the web page, or the other option is to email the Dorset Coast Forum, and the email address is there. But it's probably easier to email my email address, which is on the web page, and the link has been provided for that. So if there's any questions, you can either raise your hand and then you can unmute yourself, or you can put them in the chat and we will see if we can reply to them. Potentially done a very good job, Ben. There's no questions.
Thank you, Hannah. Hannah says very informative, Matt. So that's
good.
good. And the recording hopefully will work, Matt, and we will put it on the webpage, won't we?
So we'll put it on the webpage, yeah. Okay, if there's no questions, then we finished a bit earlier than expected, so 45 minutes or so. So we'll let you enjoy the rest of your evening, and yeah, get buckled down for Storm Bran that's about to hit us over the next couple of days potentially. Thanks for joining us, everyone, and yeah, enjoy the rest of your evening.